Hi, I'm Rob Cosman. Welcome to my shop. Wood hinge boxes make wonderful gifts. And getting close to Christmas. I'm going to show you how to make a really simple box that you can put the hinge on. Stay with me. It's going to be different. I'm going to show you how to do a very simple mitered box. You can use mostly hand tools, but then we're going to go in, and if you're not really highly skilled in dovetails or don't feel like you're ready to tackle that, I'm going to show you how to mimic the look of a dovetail using a little thin spline. It's not hard to do. Looks complicated, but it isn't. There's one using. Okay, I want to explain what we're going to do with this joint in case it's not clear. So if you're new to cutting dovetails, the smaller they are, the more difficult they are. You wouldn't think it, but it's very difficult to get in those little tiny places. So if you want the dovetail look, but you're not confident in your ability to do it, what we're going to do is going to miter the pieces first, and we're going to show you how to clean those up, and also how to tweak it so that the miter comes out perfect, so you're not having to squeeze it together. It actually goes just exactly how it should. And we'll glue that, and that actually gives you, especially if the surface has been planed and you glue it properly, that's going to be fairly strong, but we want to strengthen it a little bit beyond that. So what we'll do is we'll take it like this. We'll literally draw out the dovetail shape on one side, and then we're going to take our dovetail saw, and we're simply going to saw down through that line. Then we're going to take, in this case, since I'm making the box out of yew, which by the way, that's Pacific yew, we're going to take some ebony. Ebony's not going to change color. It's always going to be black. And even as the yew ages a little bit, you'll still see that. So we're going to go in there, kind of cut our splines out of ebony, set them in there, and when we flush them off, we're going to have that appearance. So reason for doing this, strengthen a miter joint, which needs a little something extra. But because we haven't got our dovetail skills right up to snuff, we're going to go in and make the next best, and I think you're going to be happy with the results. Every once in a while, you got to make modifications. So I was cutting this on the table saw, and it was splintering really bad on the back side, and that was actually on the top side. I was actually had it up like that. So and I know this yew is often very brittle. So rather than risk that, I put together a little jig for sawing it by hand, and I'll show you how I'm going to do this because I'm going to use a special shooting board. So it doesn't matter what the cut looks like, I just want to get rid of the bulk of the material. So before I go any further, I've got to see what I've got left for material. I'm going to have to modify my dimensions. So we'll carry this line around. Make a new cut. Now once we do that, we can clean it up. Make sure your blade is parallel to the sole on your plane. We'll go in there. You don't have to worry about breakout in the back side because we have support right there by that piece of plywood. Since this wasn't one long board and where I would wrap the grain around, they actually came like this. I'm going to, and the inside is as good as the outside. I'm going to make this cut right here, and then this will be the outside, and what that will allow me to do is maintain my length. So instead of having to come in and make another cut this way and losing that much material, I'll use this as the outside, so that one cut will serve to cut the miter in both pieces. And then I will simply cut this way out here, and I can maintain my length. I'm going to use a piece of ebony for the lid and a piece of 1/8" plywood for the bottom. And that means I need to cut a groove. Now to make it easy, I'm going to cut the groove in the same spot, top and bottom, and then I can mix and match as far as lining up the grain or whatever way I want to make it look. I'll probably leave the lid a little bit thicker and just cut a rabbet around it. And the bit that I use an 1/8" router bit, is the exact width I need for the 1/8" Baltic birch plywood on the bottom. Now to measure for both the lid and the bottom, go right to the end of the groove and to the other side. I always manage to put the wrong end on. That is 2 13/16. I'm going to cut it back to 2 3/4. So the width is going to be 2 3/4. And the length, hold it in a little bit, 6 1/4. Okay, pieces are all ready. This piece of ebony, I cut a rabbet all the way around it so it'll sit down in. That's been hand planed on both sides. The piece of Baltic birch, I actually hand planed one side, sanded the other. The reason I did that is because when I hand planed it, it was taken off enough that I couldn't spare much more and I would make it too loose. So I just gave it a little light sanding with 320 grit. Now I want to line these up. Now there's a little difference in that band. You can kind of see it. So I'm going to put that like that. Turn this one around. That looks better. Now I just want to have a quick look at the top edge, since that's what you're going to see. You can see how the grain is quite a bit different, so I'm going to keep it like that. And the last thing I'll check is just to make sure I've got them in the order that looks best. So the option would be to switch these around. This one almost doesn't fit in there very well. Back the way we were. Well, I guess that's what we're going to have to work with. Okay, now just before I put it together, I'm going to tape up the glue surfaces and wax the inside. I'll wax all of this, and I'm going to wax the inside surfaces of the box parts. I don't want to get any glue on the miters, so if I just take a piece of masking tape and mask that off, that'll prevent that from happening.
Kiki.
Get the color change. Okay, ready to glue up. Everything's been waxed. Now I'm going to use this. This is automotive refinish masking tape. And it's a little bit stronger than regular masking tape or painter's masking tape. It also is stickier and it makes a good clamp. So what we want to do is line these pieces up. Actually, probably good to have a straight edge to put them against. Now I'll have a couple layers. Make it even stronger. In fact, I think I'll do is trim this off. So the ebony piece will go in there. Make sure that that's going to fit. That's a cleaner looking side, although this is nice and smooth. That's one hand plane. I'm going to put that on the outside. Drop that down in there. Now I'm going to use some Q-tips just so I can place that glue well. One of the advantages of putting that wax on the panels before it got assembled is it will prevent any of the glue that might squeeze over from seizing the joint or seizing the panel. Carefully fold these in. Make sure that those line up in the groove. Line up this last one. Now the joints look tight, top and bottom. There'll be enough pressure on there to have that turn out all right. We've got to get this down to fit that. And the only way to do it is with a hand plane. But you may be thinking, how are you going to hold that in place? Well, I've got a piece of MDF with a piece of sandpaper on it. And the friction created with the sandpaper will allow me to do this. Okay, that might be it. Now, the fact that that side's a little bit thicker, well, what I'll do is plane so that this part of the plane where there is no blade rides over here, So all I'm taking is material off on the right side. And it's only going to go probably to about there. So as long as I can get it over the entire length of this piece. And I sure hope I made this piece long enough. I'm going to make this one a little bit long so I can trim it. I'm going to use my crosscut saw. And we'll number this. And this one will go out to the 2-inch mark. Don't need to number that one, we've already got a This one is right on the 29. Put a mark on here. Detail. But next move is to drill these for the pin. So there's the pin, it's 16th inch welding rod. We got to drill a hole dead center. So I'm going to take my jig, we sell these, been selling them for years, and I project that drill bit, the amount that I want to drill in. So when we do this, that's going to come right to this point. So I screw on my receiver, which is for the 1/4 inch. Chuck this up. Now while that's spinning, it gives you your perfectly centered hole. When it comes to these little tiny ones, these are easy to hold on to, but when the real small ones, you just lick your fingers and that'll give you enough grip. Line those up. What you want are nice tight fitting sections so that when you put it together and when the lid is closed, you can't see. Now I'm going to set this aside until we're ready to use it. Now the lid on the box that we're mimicking was 3/4. But the difference is this hinge doesn't go all the way through, so I didn't have to worry about it here. Now I am going to go all the way through, so I have to allow for that. So, use my steel rule. If we went 3/4, First thing we have to recognize is that we're going to lose some when we cut the lid off. So let's assume that we're going to lose. You can do it on the bandsaw. Keep it down to 3/30 seconds. So that part's going to be waste. Let's just draw that in with a square. Hope I can keep it to that. So that's waste. Now I think what we're going to have to do is have a small dovetail here and then two down here that are going to be bigger, and that's okay. They don't have to all be the same. And we want to have as much spline doing the job of strengthening the joint as possible. So if we draw 45 coming across the joint, let's see how can we do this so we don't. Right about there. Now, problem with that is that looks too long for something like this. So I'm going to suggest we're going to back off. Maybe right here. Yeah, that looks better. This would have been really awkward looking at it from this side. You're seeing a dovetail that long with the material only being 3/8 of an inch or less. So that looks good. So this will be what would be our waist if it was an actual dovetail. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We'll lay out the other side so that we know how far down to go, and then we've got to do that on all four corners. That's pretty close. Okay, you kind of have to watch both at the same time. And I normally cut beside the line, but I'm going to almost cut on the line. I'm going to get some help with my eyes. Now you want that base of the cut to be flat. So when you put your spline in, it goes right to the bottom on both sides. And the grain direction is kind of going in both directions on this. Got to be really careful if you plane across, because the grain on these splines is really prone to tearing out in that direction. But if you got a really very light setting, should be able to get by. You also have the option of sanding this, but I like the look of this material when it's planed. Now I've got that throat down really tight, so hopefully that'll control any and all tear out. Just get rid of that built up glue. All right, now, I still have to cut this and then finish it one more time after it's all assembled with the hinge, so I'm not going to worry about taking off any more right there. I'm going to have to do this with a handsaw. By the time we allow for the kerf of the saw, and then coming back a 1/4 of an inch so we don't interfere with the hinge, and we don't want this to be right on top of that. We don't want this ebony veneer to be right on top of the hinge. So we've got to allow a little bit of room. I want about a 16th, so I'd like to be right there. And that barely allows it. I'm going to have to do this with a handsaw. All right, let me show you how I'm going to do that. I need to split that right in the middle between here. At least that's where I need to make my cut. So we get that actually right here. That gives us 3/8 of an inch, so 3/16. I'll check that down from the top. And that's going to be 13/16. I'll just randomly check another one to see if we're going to be okay. 13/16. Yeah, it's okay. So I'm going to make a little jig just to hold the saw blade against, so I can't risk being off at all. And making a long cut like that with a back saw is going to be a little bit difficult. So I'm going to make just a block of wood that'll reference up against here, that'll come down to that point where we want to cut, which is 13/16. Yeah, right there. Yeah, okay, I made a little jig for helping hold the saw. I'm going to reference off of the bottom, and I'm just going to draw a line and see if everything's going to line up by the time you get to the other side. Good. Okay, now clamp that between a couple pieces of wood. Could just hold this freehand, but I think it might be advantageous to clamp it somehow. At least have one clamp on there. I'm going to clamp right on the edge of right on the joint line, so there's not to pull or to apply too much pressure to the middle of the box. Now, I think this could use one out here as well. These are a light duty clamp, so good for stuff like this. So this is a rip tooth medium tenon, and this is going to take a while just because of the size of the cut. Now I'm holding the saw against the straight edge. Okay, now we need to get these two lids, or two pieces, perfectly matched up. And to do that, I'm going to use some sticky back sandpaper on a piece of 1-inch MDF. And the secret here is just to make sure you apply even pressure. And I'll occasionally flip it around, just so that if I'm bearing down more on one side than the other, it evens out. And you want to keep your paper clean, so it'll cut faster. Well, we may have a problem. I've got lots of room here. I can easily cut it without touching the spline. But on this side, I'm really close. And I'm almost positive it's going to cut into the spline. And then if we look on this side, because we always have the option of putting it on the back and leaving the front alone, but I don't think we have room. Also, I made my cut on the lid. I made it too narrow. I got extra room on the bottom. I don't have on the top. And I really can't put more of the hinge in the bottom and the top to save it, so I guess we'll just cut it and see what happens. Mark it so we get it back together properly. Now I'm a little concerned about this blowing out the back side. So I think what I'll do is I'll have another piece of wood behind it to support it. I'm going to do this in multiple passes. I'm trying to take it all in one. Got to stay tight to the fence. Well, we just touched the spline. Yeah, it might not look so bad. There's our gap. That's just about exactly what we want. If you don't have a gap, you risk after it's clamped together, the front being sprung, so it'll end up sitting like that instead of closing down tight. So we'll make our hinge. Fortunately, they're hard to see. So we're going to glue here. We're going to glue here. And we're going to glue here. Now we can put this in place. Line up the ends. Bring that up a little. Glue here. Glue here. All right, out of the clamps, we'll just flush off that excess and then try opening it. I've got the throat down tight, and to avoid any possible tear out, I've got a very light cut. Let's see if it works. Yep, everything moves just the way it's supposed to. I like that amount of opening. No glue in the inside. And it closes down tight. That's actually turned out really nicely. Now I've got to plane off the ends, put a finish on it, clean it all up. If you like my work and enjoy my style of teaching, click on any one of these videos and help take your woodworking to the next level. I've always said, better tools make the job so much easier. If you click on the link below, the chisel and plane icon, it'll take you to our site and introduce you to all the tools that we actually manufacture right here in our shop. It'll also give you information on our online and in-person workshops.